Okay, so now talking about influential points and whether those influential points are high leverage and or outliers. Okay, what does this mean? Well, if we look at this graph, right, says, or this scatter plot says this shows the cost in dollars and the battery life in hours for a sample of netbooks, small laptop computers, right, your Chromebooks, all of those types of things, from several years ago. Right? What effect do the two netbooks that cost $500, well, over here, right? What effect do those, right, seem to have on the least squares regression line? And here's our least squares regression line. What effect do they seem to have on the correlation coefficient, on the standard deviation of the residuals, and on the coefficient of determination? Okay? Well, hopefully you can see, right, that these 2 points are kind of pulling this line down by quite a bit. In fact, if I took those 2 points away, I would seem to have a positive correlation, right? But with these 2 points in here, I'm going to have a negative correlation, right? R value is going to be negative. Yet if I actually look at this data, I'd be like, yeah, that R value, right, those are very influencing on the regression line, right, that R value seems to be that it should be a positive correlation, right? That the more expensive the netbook, the longer the battery life. You just happen to have 2 really expensive ones that pull it down, right? That's what we're talking about when we say influential points. Now, those points may be high leverage or they may be outliers. But first, what's going to happen, right? What effect do they have on the least squares regression line, the correlation, the standard deviation of residuals, and the coefficient of determination? We just kind of answered part of it, so let's write it down. Alright, so like we said, we're pulling down this least squares regression line, right? And if we took those out, we'd see probably a positive linear correlation. And so all of a sudden, with this line, and we look at it, it seems to be making a weak to no correlation when we seem to have moderate to strong positive correlation without their inclusion. Right, that the R squared, the coefficient of determination, is going down. The R, the correlation coefficient, is going down. The S, the variability, the standard deviation of the residuals, that's going up. Right, so, would these be considered influential points? And if so, high leverage or outliers? What would we say? Okay, well, our answer is because the removal would markedly change the least squares regression line, they are influential, right? We take those 2 points out, we change from a negative correlation to a positive correlation. That's huge, okay? And because the residuals of these points, right, that if I look at what is the distance from these points up to there and compare it to the distance of some other points, right? Well, the residuals here are in line with a lot of the other residuals. They're not really too different from the others, so they may not be outliers. Okay? Would they be high leverage points? Well, let's think. Well, they would be high leverage points because these points here are really far away from this pattern in a given direction, and it's pulling that line towards it, right? It's essentially they're acting as this Archimedean fulcrum, right? That give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum, and I can move the world, right? This quote attributed to Archimedes, right? That these points are so far out, they're looking at this line that now it's looked like it's becoming this lever that I'm pulling and I'm splitting off this data. Those are called high leverage points. They are influential. Okay? Now, had these points instead been well up here, right, and I would have a line from here that would go to up here, right, had the points been, hey, here's these El Cheapo ones that are way up here, those would be influential. They're changing the line. They would be outliers, right, but, right, moving from here to moving to there, really isn't that much. We would call those high leverage. So it really depends on which direction you're moving. Generally, we talk about in the X direction, it's going to be high leverage. In the Y direction, they're going to be outliers. Okay? Ask questions for clarification. Hopefully that clarifies this idea of influential and outliers. Make sure you get those definitions down from your textbook. And then the high leverage point's another way of defining things you can look up if you wish. You want to read more about Archimedes and his fulcrum? That's a fun little research.